Thanks, Ben. Has someone's got their mic? For those councillors online, yep, we'll just clear up the vocals. Looks like it is the surface sub. Thank you, councillors. Right, we'll get underway for the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting for the 2nd of October. Just a quick round for, we have councillors Smith, Dunbar Smith, Nicol, Downard, Cookson, Hughes and Clarkson in the chambers. We also have Councillor Mahuta online. I'll start with you, Tracy, for a Karakia, please.
Yep, kia ora e morena councillors. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, I he aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Thank you, Tracy. So we have before us today a number of items. We have 2 that are due for decisions and the rest are information items. Ideally, lunch is scheduled for 12:30 and I've counted up Tracy's time on the run sheet and we'll only be here for 2 hours and 12 minutes, apparently. Health and safety, I think everybody in the room is well aware of health and safety, so we'll jump on to apologies. So far we have apologies for Councillor Graf, Councillor Story and Councillor Hodge.
And Councillor Kneebone just said he might join a bit late. He'll be 10 minutes away or something.
A lateness for Councillor Kneebone.
And I'm also online.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Strange. I'll move that the apologies be accepted. Second, thank you, Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Confirmation of the agenda. Can I have a move for that? Thank you, Jennifer. Second, thank you, Mike. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Move on. Are there any disclosures of interest from anyone on any of the items today before us? It's a no. Thank you, councillors. We have no deputations. So the first item we have is 6.1 on page 8, and that is a confirmation of the Submissions Subcommittee minutes on the 14th of August. And that was around the emissions reduction plan submission.
Happy to move.
Thank you, Jennifer. Second. Thank you, Ben. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried.
Aye.
So we'll move on to our first item in front of us, which is item 8, and that's on agenda page 17. And that's the WRC submission to the proposed amendments to the Bay of Plenty Regional Pest Management Plan. As you'll be aware, we did cover, had a bit of an outline of our own pest management plan a week ago, and it's great to see some cross-boundary alignment coming through in our submission towards the Bay of Plenty proposed plan. So I'll kick off. We have Katrina and Patrick down the end there, so I'll hand it over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. So I'll just start with a very brief summary of the submission for you all, and then we're happy to answer any questions. So Regional Pest Management Plans, or RPMPs, are prepared under the Biosecurity Act and direct how organisms that have been declared pests by the relevant regional council are to be managed within that region. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council is currently undertaking a partial review of its RPMP and is proposing some amendments to reflect emerging pest issues. The proposed amendments include the addition of new pest species to the plan, including additional wallaby species, exotic callirpa, golden clams and turtles, as well as some proposed changes and additions to rules. Submissions on the proposed amendments closed on the 24th of September, However, staff obtained an extension until the end of the day today to enable the committee to consider the submission at this meeting. So in terms of the draft submission, WRC's key area of interest in relation to the proposed amendments is in achieving cross-boundary alignment with the current Waikato RPMP, which became operative in 2022. So the submission, which starts on page 21 of the agenda, supports the proposed additions of pest animals and pest plants to the Bay of Plenty RPMP. However, it recommends some specific amendments relating to the proposed pest animals and the rules that will apply to them. The amendments sought in the submission relate to including Bennett's, brush-tailed and swamp wallabies in the exclusion pest program rather than the eradication and progressive containment programs as proposed. A technical change to the wording of one of the rules to ensure it applies to a wider group of freshwater aquatic pests, including a separate rule making it illegal to release turtles, and expanding the requirement for people to notify the Bay of Plenty Regional Council when they receive products contaminated by pests to apply to freshwater pests rather than marine pests only. Overall, staff consider the changes recommended in the submission would enable improved management of the identified pests in the Bay of Plenty region and increase alignment with the operative Waikato RPMP. That's it in terms of my summary. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Katrina. Ben.
Yeah, happy to move this, but firstly, I'd just like to note the skill of the staff in recognising that Rule 7 would not work for them, given that Kalaupapa is a mollusk and the turtles are reptiles. It's useful how you can help other councils identify tiny things that would trip things up, and that's a really clever way of doing it. So, yeah.
Cool, thank you. And like we have spoken to staff, and they have appreciated us finding omissions or technical kind of errors. So that it's good collaborative relationship.
And just for Councillor Dunbar-Smith's own information, Kalaupapa is actually a weed, not a mollusk.
Oh, could
No problem at all. Stu, you have a question?
Happy to second, and just going to request that when you present this, that you note our relationship, particularly around wallabies, and because I find it quite odd the way they're proposing to categorise the other wallabies. It just doesn't make sense. Have they made a mistake, or have they got different views to us? Or
no, I think it was a bit of an omission, like just a technical omission. Yeah.
So I mean, I guess the point would be that when you're presenting that the potential eradication of wallabies relies on us having a really strong working relationship and understanding of the issues. So emphasise that. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for that, Stu, and noting that we are requesting to speak to our submission too, so we can raise that.
I've just mentioned I was at Rotorua Lakes District Council the other day.
Can you just speak a little bit closer? Sorry, Jen. Thanks.
Yeah, I was at Rotorua Lakes District Council presenting the other day, and two of the councillors from Bay of Plenty were there, and they spoke very highly of our relationship, and particularly with regards to managing wallabies. So I just thought I'd put the positive in here.
Thank you. And Tipper online.
Firstly, thank you for the submission and the work done to Patrick and the team. My questions are: what issues are there still with these with the submission? Does it smooth out most of the matters between us and Bay of Plenty? What did they submit on into our ramp? And does being specific about wallabies means that our funding is going to follow that eradication program? Questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so we had a lot of workshops with Bay of Plenty Regional Council as we developed our regional pest management plan and our approach to biosecurity in general. So we tried to make those inclusions before we got to the consultation phase. I don't think there's any requirement at this point to change any funding into any of the programs associated with the collaboration we're doing. If that, I checked that was the right answer to the question.
I guess last feedback I got from them, we are underfunding the wallaby program to keep the wallabies over the hill in their thinking. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying by us being very explicit about wallabies, does that mean that we're going to do more work there? That's my question to you, Patrick. Thank you.
No, not at this point. Our funding, we're quite comfortable where it's sitting at the moment. And we're constantly assessing that, but it's, yeah, it's a nice shared program. We're on the same page, so no change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tipper. Come to you, Chris. And Noel, did you have a question? Can you use your mic, Noel, please?
Essentially, I think I've worked it out. What we're trying to say is that the wallabies shot on site, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, so I think that we pointed out that there is potential that they would get these other species into their region because people move these things around. We already know that. And if they don't have rules for other species like the swamp wallaby, they unless they have the landowner permission, they wouldn't be able to use the powers of the Biosecurity Act to act fast and get it, essentially shoot on site or eradicate them.
Eradication being that key.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the team? So we have a mover and a seconder. There's Jordan. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you, guys. Our next item up is the soil risk from farm dairy effluent, and that's on agenda page 27. So this summarises this is our second decision report and summarises the main issues raised and discussed in our council workshop as of the other day, and outlines a prepared option to address the matters relating to WRC's risk map and the Dairy New Zealand's storage calculator guidance. So come to Malcolm and Mike down the end there. Hand over to you guys.
Thank you, councillors. I'd just like to introduce Dr. Malcolm McLeod. It's Malcolm's first presentation to our committee. Malcolm has been with us a couple of years now. He has 45 years experience as a soil scientist and came to us from Manaaki Whenua. So I'll hand over to Malcolm to reintroduce some of the material we covered in the workshop, and then we can go on to questions.
Thank you. Welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. Could we have the slides up on the screens? Lovely, thank you. This is really a memoir about Mr. Phillips' presentation to the long-term plan and also to the council workshop on the 3rd of September. Next slide, please. So Mr. Phillips
No.
Thank you. So Mr. Phillips has raised issues around the determination and the classification of soil risk for farm dairy effluent, and that impinges on the soil storage requirements. He was concerned about the accuracy of Waikato Regional Council's soil risk for farm dairy effluent map, and also he wanted some of the peat soils classified low risk, and to some extent that's been incorporated already. And Mr. Phillips advocates the use of saturated surface infiltration as the primary measure of soil risk, and we'll move on to discuss that later. And also he was concerned about the operation of Dairy NZ's dairy effluent storage calculation. And so we'll move on to addressing those issues. So I'd just like to turn to the next slide, please. And here we've got the soil risk framework, and this was developed by Holbrook and others out of Ag Research in 2010. And about 4 years ago, it was updated to accommodate those potentially low risk peat soils, and that is the category F, which is on the right-hand side. So the high-risk soils are categories in red there, A, B and C. And A and B generally relate to soils with some drainage issues. And C is sloping land greater than 7 degrees, or it has a drainage issue as well. So those are the high-risk ones. And when it comes to applying effluent to those soils, you can only do it when there's some soil water deficit. And so the dairy effluent is going to go into storage. And you can imagine then that if it's been raining in winter, then you're going to need quite a lot of storage because there'll be no available storage in the soil. Then we move on to the low risk soils, which are in green. And essentially they're well-drained soils on land that's sloping less than 7 degrees. And essentially you can put on effluent as long as you're not putting on too much, so it's only 50% of the volume that's available in the soil. But you can do that within 24 hours of rainfall. So you only need 24 hours of some drainage and you're good to go. And finally, on the right-hand side, if that relates to the peat soils, and they've got to have nice structure and also a low water table. So on our next slide, we talk about why the use of soil infiltration is limited. And the soil infiltration just gives you the maximum rate at which the farm dairy effluent can be applied. It doesn't tell you anything about the depth, just the rate. It's in millimetres per hour. The trouble is it's in both space and time. It's very variable. And so you've really got to, for a good indication, you've got to have quite a lot of replication. It's also influenced by recent land management. So you can imagine that if you've had your stock in a paddock and it's been a bit wet, you can easily get pugging and that'll slow down the infiltration rate. Doesn't account for preferential flow, which is where dairy shed effluent could move down between the cracks of the soil and not interact with the soil and not get rehabilitated. It doesn't take into account any slower layers that might be in the soil at depth, slower conducting layers, or if it's got a high water table. So we don't think it's conducive to an achievable pragmatic classification for the soil risk of FDE. Then turning to our soil risk for farm dairy effluent map, which is on our website, and you can see that on the right-hand side. And all I want for you to take out of this is there's a lot of red there, and the red are the high-risk soils. And remember, it's broadly indicative only. It's at regional scale. But the pocket guide developed by Holbrook, it's got site-based assessments, and that's what should be being used. And remember that this map was created in about 2011, so that's quite some time ago now, and it uses the New Zealand Land Resource Inventory soil data and the slope data. The difficulty with the slope data is that each of the map delineations is given a dominant slope, and so there may be areas within there which have less slope or more slope. But now we've got SMAP, which is the flagship soil map coming out of Manaaki Whenua Lankia research now, and also LIDAR, so we can derive slope information. And Waikato Regional Council's invested heavily in both SMAP and in LIDAR. So those things could be used to update the risk map. But remember, it would still be only a regional scale map. It wouldn't be a farm scale map. And we wouldn't really have any basis to differentiate the different high risk and low risk peats.
So Malcolm, if I can just interrupt you. So who do we see the target audience for this map being?
It's not used a lot by council.
So our own staff you're referring to? Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. But it gives a general impression of where you might be able to irrigate effluent onto low risk or high risk soils. And certainly if it was upgraded using the SMAP and LiDAR, then it would improve it, but it still would only be a regional broad scale map, and people should be using farm scale information.
But yeah, Mike, please.
Oh, just to add into that, so Hayden did look into the number of times the map was being accessed. I think in the report, I can't remember the exact figure, maybe 1,800 times. So there are people out there who are accessing this map. I've undertaken to go to contacts in Fonterra, Tātua and Open Country just to identify if they are using, because that was one of the things Fred highlighted, was that he thought some of the people giving advice to farmers on dairy effluent storage were using this map particularly. So that is something we still need to follow up on. And if we were going to take this map off the website or replace it and update it, we'd want to make sure that the people who are using it were communicated with ahead of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, Noel.
Just a supplementary question. If I was to be looking at effluent ponds and the likes, and I went onto the site and I saw that map, essentially that map is saying it's all high risk. The whole of Waikato is high risk. So it's of no real value because we haven't got farm scale. Yeah. So is there some reason why we don't have farm scale available? And is that only available through the SMAP and the new LiDAR?
Oh, come to Tracy, I think, has a comment around that.
Just before Malcolm goes into that in detail, through you, Mr. Chair, the key reason why we don't have it at farm scale is the cost. To get SMAP done for the entire region, and that's been a 5 to 6 year program through the last 2 LTPs, and we've carried over 90K, which I think is the remaining, which is the West Coast. Has been a total cost of 3.4 million just to map it at the regional scale to support Plan Change 1 and other work. So we aren't required to map things at a farm scale, but we are required to have the detail at the regional scale, and there are few people who can do the work. Everybody's wanted it done in the last few years, so that's why it's taken about 7 years to get the entire region done for SMAPs. The LiDAR, we have been part of an all of region consortium with LINZ and some other partners, DRNZ, Waikato River Authority and others, to get the entire region flowing. That LiDAR data has just been made publicly available, and there's a whole lot of derivatives from that. Our contribution to the LiDAR was 780,000, and that is just our contribution, not other councils. So it's very cost prohibitive to do it at a finer grain. We thought the level that we've invested, which hasn't been insignificant, is the prudent level of investment. Sorry, and Malcolm, if you'd like to add anything else.
No, that's a very good explanation. Thanks.
So when people are doing their effluent, someone, and Fred's obviously a farm advisor, the cost of getting farm scale and local detail to actually support what they're doing has got to be from this investment, their own investment, and so that's now publicly available that they can access. Is that what I'm hearing? You just said something's public. The LiDAR's
Yes.
public level, but the SMAP's not. Obviously,
SMAP's online, but only at a regional
Regional
scale,
scale.
1 to 50,000. So they would combine the use of LiDAR and more detailed soil mapping to come up. But they might not have to map their whole farm. They might just say, right, these areas above 7 degrees, I don't have to worry about those. Let's concentrate on the land less than 7 degrees.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Can I get Tracy a mic? I have got a speaking order. Thanks. Thank you.
And through you, Mr. Chair, it's important to know that the LiDAR is at centimetre increments. So it is much finer than what we've ever had before. So it's a very powerful data set. What we will be doing, whilst it's released online, you know, at the moment here it is. What we will be doing is putting together some webinars to help people understand it and see how they can use it for themselves.
Thanks, Tracy. Robbie?
Yeah, I just, something to throw in here. Most farmers already soil map their farms. It's a part of their soil testing regime that you do every year or two. So I can't see that, you know, that thing there needs to be removed because farmers understand that better than that anyway. And like on my peat farm, it's most probably got 5 different soil types on one farm. And if you're doing your 150 core sample, and if farm plans were implemented, you'd have all the information. The information would just come through. There's my soil profile. There's that blah blah sign off done.
But Robbie, can I ask you, excuse my ignorance, so where's that information held at the moment for your
Farmers
specific
individually hold that on each of their farms.
Okay, so that's, yeah.
Well, when I go into a crop, I'll put a 150 core sample down for a crop, for a maize crop or a turnip crop or whatever crop it is. I've already got that soil profile already been done on each property, and you know, really the information's there. It's just got to be shared. Yeah, in fact, it'll come through in farm plans.
Thanks. So I have Stu, Ben, Bruce, and then Chris. So Stu, I'll come to you.
The thing I want clarification on before I support further work being done here is what the benefit is, because listening to Fred's presentation the other day, and it's not the first time I've heard it, I might add, it's come at us a few times over the years. The inference is that this is the only reason why his clients can't justify having less effluent storage, but we know there's a whole bunch of other reasons as to why we need effluent storage. So I want to understand why those other things aren't being considered and why we're not. I want justification for us putting more money into improving the accuracy of what we've got here. So it's just Robbie's, I mean, not everyone's done the level that you probably have, but there's nothing stopping them from doing it. Fred just wants us to pay for it. Yeah, well, I'm reading it.
Yeah,
I think Councillor Nebo raised a really important point, is that what we're dealing with here is managing the risk of dairy shed effluent irrigation. And as Robbie said, farmers will have varying levels of information. Some farmers will have really detailed farm scale information, even paddock scale information. Others will be looking to make decisions on even regional scale information like this, which is where it is. I think it could be useful, which is why I think we need to test this with some of our partners out there as to who's using it. But then at a 1 in 50,000 scale with the SMAPs information, there'll be others who are happy to base their risk calculations on that information. So it really comes down to how the farmers what information they need to make best informed decisions about the risk of dairy shed effluent application, because it's a major source of concern for farmers and us as well. Thank you.
thanks, Mike. Ben?
Yeah, I wonder why we have that map up at all, given that Dockland and Coromandel and Pirongia and, you know, there's a whole lot of areas that clearly aren't going to be used in the system. And I wonder whether it might be better to remove the map, but actually have, as Tracy's talked about, the instructions for how to go to SMAP and individually people can do that.
Tracy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess that is the whole intent of why we've brought it today, to just take something off a website instantly causes probably more grief. There's a process we need to work through. As Mike said, some people are using this map. I would just point out that it looks like there's almost 100% coverage at the scale that it's shown on the slide. So I would suggest that as we go finer in, it's not, you know, the coverage is still pretty high, we accept that, but it's not quite as flooded as it looks at the scale here. But there is a process we need to go through, and I think importantly, the map is used by some people. We need to understand that, understand why, and as you say, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, navigate people towards better tools. What we could do is put something on the website in the interim that says there is an issue, we are looking into it, and there will be a change coming. And I think that is a holding pattern to signal, hey, we are getting to the bottom of it.
Thank you, Tracy. Bruce?
Yeah, so this is actually a communication issue, and it's about map scales. And most people who go onto the website do not understand what a map scale even is. Is the regional scale map shown in that image at 1 to 250,000?
1 to 50,000.
1 to 50. And the SMAP system is at 1 to 50,000 as
Correct.
well. So the map is correct at the scale that it is depicted. And this is the point. And so there should be an explanatory note on the website. Is there an explanatory note on the website pointing out that the map's at 1 to 50,000 and what that actually means for an individual farm? Is that note up on the online? Because it should be. Because actually, I'll come back, the map is correct at the scale it's presented. And this is an important first signal. And that's what it is, a first signal that there may be an issue. But as Robbie rightly points out, when you do the appropriate scale of mapping, i.e. at the farm scale, all will be revealed. And what it will probably show is that some is still red and other bits are not red. But the point is the way we communicate scale of maps. This is a fundamental piece of information that should always be presented. Whenever a map is shown on the screen to us, it should say scale, 1 to 250, 1 to 50, 1 to 100, what is it? And then we will understand, it will help us understand as well, the significance of scale and mapping. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that point, Bruce. Chris?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Really, I guess just following on from what Bruce is saying, I believe we've got two options. The first one is to take the map down because it is misleading. Be interesting to know from the research when you talk to the various dairy companies, Mike, as to what use they're putting it to. But unless there's very strong justification for keeping it as it is, then it should go. But in any event, the disclaimer that we've got on there at the moment, I don't believe is appropriate. We should be picking up on Bruce's comments. We should be providing far more detail and explanation of what the map actually represents. And if there is evidence to suggest that there are areas in there which are not at risk, then why can't we put another grade of colour in there if we're going to continue with the map? I know we've got some green, but there's very little. But where we have evidence that's going to prove that the ground is not at risk, then maybe we put a yellow shading on the map if we're going to actually keep it up as a source of reference to users. And the other issue I'd like to raise is I had an email yesterday regarding the survey, the work that's going to start to be done on the peat. Is it possible as part of that project we could be doing work on measuring the risk associated with the soil, the peat soils, as part of the peat management, peat research project? So we're taking samples, then surely it should be possible to identify the risk factor of the soil at the same time. And that could then be incorporated in not a 50 under 50, but maybe a more detailed map to give us an idea of more localised at-risk soils. And that might also give us better handle on a bigger map if there are pockets that prove to be less at risk, if that can be extrapolated out across a bigger area, if we've got a different colour on the map, then that will be a more accurate representation of the actual risk of those particular soils. So, got a few other notes here, but that basically summarises, I think, where we need to get to. If we can't do better than this, we take it down. Otherwise, it's misleading.
So I'll come back to you, gentlemen, because there are 2 or 3 questions within Chris's summary there. And I just wonder too, with what Ben brought up, as well as obviously a possible middle shading there, etc., but also shading in the land that's actually not relative to dairy effluent. You know, as was sort of indicated, yes, it's a map at scale, but there's a hell of a lot of area in there that's not dairy relative. So, but yeah, if so, 1, different codings of shading across the map was a question, and then also 2, can the infill rate testing be done at the same time you're doing the carbon work on the peat soils? Indicative sort of time and cost around that, whether viable or not. Thank you.
So to the first point, I think what we're recommending is to develop an updated soil risk map using the SMAP and LiDAR information, and I think also provide a better resolution in terms of land use. You know, as folks have said, there's no need for us to identify soil risk for farm dairy effluent in conservation estate or, you know, hill country farming. So I think that's part of developing a more fit for purpose map going forward. In terms of Councillor Hughes's question about whether should be another category, I guess we need to be careful about, given the issue of scale that Councillor Clarkson mentioned, we have to be very careful about identifying something as low risk or even moderate risk if there is potential that it is in fact high risk when you go down to that local scale. So I think regardless of the level of detail we provide, we will still want to be able to say, or we will still be saying, a farm scale soil risk assessment is preferred. But in the absence of that, this is the best information we can provide. We don't want to be identifying potentially low risk areas where we don't have that information. That could be risky.
Thanks, Mike. Robbie.
Yeah, well, one way to help solve some of that would be an overlay of soil types in those catchments that are high dairy. Because if you take like mine on the eastern side, there's only most probably 3 major soil types. It's either Whitehouse silty loam, Waitoa silty loam, and I think it's Alsto silty loam. So there's not a lot of difference there. And there's a big difference in the makeup of those 3, and the locals know what they are. So like a map that laid 2 or 3 layers of colour that influenced, that could be handy. Because
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think what we could do is when you look at this map, if it's on our maps on the website, then you can click the layers on and off yourself. So it is kind of a how-to guide. If you've called up this map, you might also be interested in that map and that map. So from my perspective, all the information is there. It's sitting on our maps. Anyone can access it now. It's just a bit of a how-to guide in order to do that. That information with the LiDAR is a lot of powerful information. As you referred to before, Councillor Cookson, farm plans when they were first mooted were part of that, getting the information as the farm scale information was obtained and landowners were happy for it to be in the public domain, we would add that more and more. So we started to get that finer detail. That won't happen as they were originally envisaged for a number of reasons. They will no longer be required in some areas. But I mean, we're always building the data. One of the things that is really important though is any data that we do put on our website goes through quite a rigorous QA test. And that's very important, as Mike said, if we're going to go down to finer layers, we've got a whole lot of metadata that sits in behind to say this data is data you can trust. So while it might seem a very quick process, there's a couple of months sitting behind that on any data that we
The
get.
soil type is sitting there is something you can trust because it's been there for a long time.
Yeah, and we can point to that data straight away. It's the finer landholder scale data that, you know, needs to be tested.
Yeah, but I think a lot of farmers preempting what was going to be required and farm plans have already collected that data sitting there. It's not rocket science. They already knew that to be able to farm that bit of the farm that way, they needed to know what nutrient loading was capable on that part of the farm and what's capable over here. So they're already doing that stuff on their own property of how to manage their farm to get the most about, or you know, we're going with that. It's just a pity that's been put on hold, but I believe in the future that's still going to be the way of resolving this. It's all going to be in that spot.
Yeah, thanks. We do have a number of slides to work through, and I do have 3 more speakers to come. So on this, so I'll come to the speakers. But what I would say is if we have covered some of the topics as you go through your slides, then let's just skip over them to keep things moving. But Chris. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, it was just clearly this is the issue that bugged us, was this map just feels intuitively wrong. From what Tracy's saying, a lot of the information is available when you go through, and I know your item 29, the map is not widely used internally. It's not used by staff in relation to compliance with permitted activities. So it's not something we're persecuting people with, but the map feels wrong. What concerns me though, is Tracy's said that to go down the SMAP LiDAR data route is highly expensive. If you're looking at the West Coast, I wouldn't like to see us revising this map for another $500,000 at annual plan time just to fix the map. I'd prefer the map disappeared and we actually had some notation about how people could use.
So through the chair, just want to be clear, we're not advocating for further investment. We made the case 9 years ago. We've got the investment for SMAPs that will withstand us for quite some time. The LiDAR investment, similarly, we got that, and that will be current for many years. But we've also got a program of renewal for parts of LiDAR, and we're also looking at new technologies such that we don't need to make some of those new investments. So I just want to give you confirmation, we're definitely not suggesting further investment. We have heard you, councillors.
Yeah. And I think if we look at it, it's the relevance of this map, who's using it, which is obviously very limited, and possible wording around a disclaimer on our website about the use of this map, etc. Moving forward. So I'm sure staff have taken note of that. I'll come to Jen. You had a question, comment?
The question was around, you said 1,800, was that in the last year or ever? Or that have looked at this map from the counter on the website?
Yeah, apologies. I think it is in the report. I think it was
sorry.
1,800 in the last 12 months.
Okay, thanks.
But
Yeah, just mindful that I don't feel like we know enough about who's actually using it. I certainly don't support, as it was just been covered, any further investment of money to update these things unless we know that there's a benefit, somebody's actually going to use it. I'm really happy to just change the website and move on. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. And I think a concern of councillors is the consequence of those that are using it and what that may mean at farm level. Bruce.
Yeah, just real quick. So the other thing is on the map, it should always indicate places where there was no field checking. And I think this will get around some of the issue relating to the large areas on that map that are currently covered red. So my understanding, Malcolm, is that SMAP never walked onto the Kaimai Range and did a soil survey.
I think my colleagues, my former job, have been up there now.
They've been up there.
Yes.
But have they done a soil map? No,
Yeah,
the point I'm making.
They will have been.
Yeah. The point I'm
testing
making is limitations of the map. So that also should always be on the bottom of the map. The areas that have proper field verification and the places that don't there should be some sort of shading which shows actually the sampling intensity here is so low that all we've done is walked along the range and had a quick look. You know, so a lot of those areas on there, my understanding from even the old Soil Bureau days is that, because I was looking for that data, and you know why, because I was studying another element of the environment and the data didn't exist basically. So that limitation should always be shown also on the legend of the map.
So I think it's clearly understood by staff that the limitations of that map and what we need to put in the way of wording around it. So I'll get you to move on. Yeah, thanks,
Okay,
Malcolm.
yeah. And through Mr. Chair, in the metadata that goes with SMAP, it will tell you how intensive the work's been. You know, whether it's legacy soil maps or whether it's good new investigations. So if we could move on to the next slide, the dairy effluent storage calculator, it was developed by Massey University and the Horizons Regional Council. And it does take a range of factors into account, which includes the soil risk information based on the soil risk framework. But there's other things in there like climate and stock numbers and catchment areas. And it does mention that there's quite a few sources of information. Your farm scale soil map, the SMAP fact sheets, and these are generated on the fly, so they're not if there's new information that goes into them, they're not static. And also the Dairy NZ Pocket Guide to the determination of soil risk. So moving on to our recommendations, we do have a scientifically robust framework for determining the soil risk for farm dairy effluent on site. And we've got guidance for field-based assessment, and that's the pocket guide produced by Dairy NZ. And it was updated about 4 years ago, and to accommodate those peat soils with low risk. So our recommendations are that the Waikato Regional Council soil risk map be updated using the best available soil and landscape data. And so we're thinking SMAP and LiDAR, and of course then areas can be shaded differently to show, well, look, these are slopes over 7 degrees. You don't need to worry about those, or these are dock estate, etc. And also that the council talks to Dairy NZ to discuss updating the dairy effluent storage guide and probably highlight more the use of farm scale information for establishing FDE risk. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the last of your slides? Yep, thanks. So I'll come back around the council table for questions. Chris?
Yes, thanks, Malcolm. I guess the bottom line is we've got a map up there at the moment. What are we going to do with it? We've got some recommendations as to what you suggest should be happening. How long is that going to take? And the other question that I raised earlier on regarding shading, we know what we've been told is that we know some of the areas are not high risk. Can we take them out of the high risk category? And do that, if we can leave the map up there, do that quickly and get the explanation on there as to what it represents, including the effects of scale. And the last question that I asked earlier on, I don't know that we've had an answer, is there a possibility of expanding the testing that's going to be done? And I know the chair asked the same question with the peat research work, whether this testing can be incorporated in there, and that data then can be incorporated in this map as well. I know it's probably not of sufficient scale. I don't know how wide your testing will be, in the peat research, but if it's sufficiently wide, then it could have an impact on a future map that's put on a website. But I think it's, at this stage anyway, I think we should take it down unless there's very compelling reasons to leave it there.
Did you want to speak to? Chris?
Just on those points, if I can, Chair. So I think specifically around the monitoring work, so the survey work. So our big, I guess, wide regional scale survey of peat resources happened summer before last. This summer, we're planning to do some work focused on soil carbon assessment. So a different objective and topic area. We have a regional monitoring program where we monitor peat levels and peat surface oscillation. There's 11 of those sites which tend to be on the sort of most well-developed peat areas. Sorry, the areas of deepest peat. And we were just talking before this meeting with the soil science guys about whether it would be valuable for us to add some surface water infiltration measurements for those long-term sites, because we currently don't have that information. So that would be a source of information that we would potentially add to the picture.
Thanks, Mike. So what you're saying is that when you do the carbon, you're taking samples for carbon testing, those samples can't be used for the effluent disposal soil type testing. That's a different soil.
Correct.
Surely it's the same piece of soil.
Different tests though.
So I guess, again, picking up on the question, and I thought I heard Mike sort of indicate that there would be a possibility to do those other infiltration tests at the same time. Is that?
So in our long-term monitoring sites, of which we've got 11, we were just having that conversation before this meeting about would that be something we could add into that long-term data set that would add value. And I guess we would take direction from yourselves and through Tracy as to how we would progress that. But yeah, so whether that would add value, we would need to look at that. That's not something we have in our current budgets. Similarly, with the work on soil carbon assessment, the budget doesn't include infiltration tests.
Okay, I think it is something that I'm hearing around the table that there is an interest in looking at that and the possibility of doing that at the same time. What I would like to bring to staff's attention too is that some of us councillors do get some feedback from landowners, and some of them are wary on why we're coming onto their land and testing for carbon and the results of that and where that may lead. Whether that's justified or not, that's not a discussion for today, but so I just think anything positive we can add, and it may be the infiltration tests or something at the same time, would be helpful to one, articulate out to landowners and the general agricultural population that we are doing this work. We're trying to get as much science behind the information that we have, and this is the process that we'd look to be doing. So possibly, yeah, if we can take that away and maybe look at that. We are putting some words around the map. So we're just adding that to the recommendation at the moment. So I think I've got another couple of speakers, have I? Oh, we got. Yeah, sorry, Tracy.
If I can just make a comment, Mr. Chair, I totally appreciate if we're going on a site, and to date, those 11 sites, all those landowners have been more than willing for us to come on site. They get all the data, so they're very thankful for that. If we can incorporate other tests within existing budgets, we will do so. I'd send that message. However, while it seems as simple as, okay, that's just another 11 tests, there is a cost associated with that. So what I suggested to the chair prior to the meeting is we'll go away and we'll have a look at those costs. We don't have a lot of bandwidth in our budgets because we have looked at them very forensically, but if the cost is able to be accommodated, then we will do so. If it is substantially significant and more, we'll bring that back. But just letting you know, if we can work within existing budgets, we will do so. If not, we'll come back to you.
Thanks for that, Tracy. No,
Thank you. I'm just going back to probably paragraph 7 in the report on page 28, which raises why Mr. Phillips came in, what he asked for. And it was all about the map. And he also advocated for the use of saturated surface infiltration rate as a primary measure. So we've seen the map up on the board, and at first glance, I would say, if I saw that, I said, well, this is irrelevant, because at a regional scale, it's not telling me what I need to know. So it's not worth having there, in my view. Secondly, in undertaking farming operations, I look at what's on my farm. I look at maybe what's on the neighbours' farms. But the reality is, when you're putting in dairy effluent storage and the ability to then move it to the land, you look at the actual farm, not the neighbour's farm, not down the road or somewhere else in the region. So it's got to be at a farm level. So unless we can get the information on the website that is meaningful to the recipients of who are going to use it, then in my view, we're wasting our time and misleading our community. So, what is the issue? I think we know what it is. We know that the map is not conducive to working towards on-farm solutions. So we should be targeting our information entirely towards that. And so I do think, and I'm not sure that I would like to know if I have staff come back to us and say, rather than staff undertake work to update or replace, I'd like to know why we're going to update it or why we're going to replace it.
I'd agree.
And this will be comfortable that we're going down a way in which our community will understand and follow. So I think there's a step before just going straight in. Happy for it to be worked through and talk to others. But I really think that we need to understand if we're updating it, what are we updating it with? Or if we're replacing it, what are we replacing it with, please? So I'm not sure that I've offered solutions. I'm just sort of trying to wrap it up in my mind and articulate what I think. And I'm not sure that that is encapsulated in that resolution at this stage, but those are my comments at the moment. Thank you.
thanks, Noel. Robbie.
Yeah, 100% support what Noel just said there. I think I'd like it to come back with where you want to go forward and then have the discussion again. I 100% support the information being collected for the capability of it taking effluent. I can't see that there'd be a huge amount of cost to that, unless there. What would one say? 11 samples. I find that I struggle how that's going to be some great cost. I do more than 11 soil sample tests on my farm every year, so I struggle how what that's going to cost. I'll leave.
Stu.
Can I suggest that recommendation C finishes where your cursor currently is? Yeah. Because I think that's speaking to what Noel just said, and I think it's speaking to what Robbie just said. Because Tracy's made it really clear that we're not going to be updating it as per what's been requested from Mr. Phillips, because the cost is astronomical, and there's really no justifiable benefit to doing it. So we're just looking to clarify the caveats and limitations of the map, aren't we? Have I missed something?
I think one of the suggestions, if we're going to leave the map up, it's misleading to have the whole map basically showing as high risk. So if we are going to leave the map up, then we do need another classification in there which can easily be identified by staff of medium or low risk, so, which would be another colour.
But we've just been explained that the cost of that's prohibitive, Chris.
Well, is it? What, we must have information in the databases, you know, like,
Well,
there is a huge
We've got 4,500
information base
dairy farms.
Yeah, so if I can help maybe try and bring some clarity to it, I do believe that this map will always be at a larger scale. It's never going to get down to farm scale, one. Two, I do think we urgently need to put some commentary around it. We've heard that it's been accessed 1,800 times over the past year. And then B, I do like the idea of looking at what those costs may be to add that additional testing into the regime. And so that's work to come back to us as such.
Sorry, can you just clarify what you mean by additional testing?
Across those 11 sites and the infiltration side of things, rather than just the carbon side of things.
And the level of value it'll add.
And the level of value it'll have. Thank you. So that's the way where I see we're sitting now, and moving forward. We've sort of glided over the Dairy New Zealand calculator, and so we haven't heard a lot of detail around what you're actually going to ask Dairy NZ. So perhaps if we could just expand on that a little bit for myself around that, because it seems to me that would be the tool that dairy effluent designers are going to use, and farmers will use more so than this map.
There before that's done, I think you're missing the direction to the it's called the SMAP and the LiDAR information, which we've got to direct people down to that level somehow.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be incorporated in the review of the communications of what presently is on the website.
On the website, you get that red map, and you know this is a regional map, but for the local level, well, on farm, you need to go to these sites. Put a couple of links, whatever.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think we need a resolution to do that, but it's part of, say.
Yeah, and it's exactly to Bruce's earlier points around the key around the map that we provide. Just a little bit of around that Dairy NZ calculator and what you're actually going to speak to them about, and where we see the lack of information or the lack of discussion around the use of it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The storage calculator was developed some time ago, and so it probably doesn't emphasise the new SMAP well enough. It probably doesn't emphasise the use of LiDAR, which is available now quite readily throughout the country. It doesn't incorporate the update to the low risk peat soils in there, but that doesn't really matter because it only talks about high or low risk soils. And so if people have identified using the pocket guide that the high or low risk, then that can be incorporated. And just one other thing about the costings to do the additional tests. Back when I worked for Land Care Research, we investigated the hydraulic conductivity of one peat soil, and it takes 3 people 1 day just to look at one site. And so you might be looking at perhaps a number of paddocks over a farm. So each site in a farm could be a day for 3 people. Okay.
Thanks, Malcolm. Robbie, did you still want to say something?
Yeah, the testing that was done 2 years ago, I'm not sure who did it, but Regional Council was involved in doing core sampling around the Karakia Plains on peat.
Yeah, peat probing. Yes. So right throughout.
They were basically holes about that. Yeah, they were, because one was on my property. It was a vicinity of that round, dug into the ground, do the soil profile, and then put it all back in the hole. So who did that testing 2 years ago?
Yes, that could easily be Manaaki Whenua Land Care Research when they're describing the soils, but the peat depth mapping will just be with a set of rods
Yeah, probing.
poking down.
Yeah, but they did a saw profile because they dug a hole in my paddock that every time I drive down it now, I hit the bloody bull right and just about jump out of the seat. So, yeah, no, okay. But so that's information that we'll get at some stage as well? Are we using that information for anything? Or not?
It forms part of the database which goes into SMAP.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robbie. Okay, I'm going to come to Tracy. We're just going to tidy up this motion a little bit with the hearings that have come out of the discussion this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we're hearing is councillors are wanting a bit more clarification on what the actual detail is in terms of updating or replacing the existing map. What I'm hearing is people don't want to jump that far that quickly. They want to understand the value of doing that. So what I was going to suggest is instead of we replace it with the clause that says that an action plan to address the matters raised in discussion at committee is brought back on the 26th of November. So that will have the detailed actions that our chair outlined, as well as the others that have raised in discussion. So that is what we'll bring back. Here are the things that we will do. Here is what we believe we need to do, either update or replace or not the map. Those are the options. Bring that back to you. Have the ongoing discussions with Dairy NZ and others, and make the changes to the website, again incorporating the matters at discussion in the interim. Is that something that council would be happy with, or have I misread the room?
I think you've ticked the boxes from my understanding and hearing around the room, Tracy, and just making sure, Mike, that we are out there talking to those dairy company partners to just make sure we fully understand who's using this map and to what result. So, if we, so that'll be part of the plan that will come back to us. So we need to just change the wording around this motion.
Scribbles to Jordan. That nay. Yeah. I guess council is very mindful that any movement, as I've said on the website, for those folk who are using it, will need to have a good explanation. If we were to remove it instantly, you would probably get a whole lot of calls from those people who we haven't heard from, who will say, "Where's it gone? What's happening? What's up there?" So, yeah. So I think some work in the interim. We can look at the suggestions from the committee and that were summarised by the chair and bring that back. You would. It's not necessarily the way we go about finding that out.
No, but you could put a sentence in to say, we're trying to find out, so get in touch if you're using it. It'd be helpful for us.
What didn't know in there. So councillors are happy how that reads? You want
At the end, map
or
will be
updated
either
or
updated or replaced or removed or whatever, it's just not updated. It's not the only option.
Yeah,
Yeah.
updated or removed. That gives you the, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I'm happy to move that motion. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Chris. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Thank you, gentlemen, very much, and thank you, councillors, for that input. Right, our next item up is the establishment, purpose and council support for the advisory committee to the regional environment, or ACRE. This is on page 46.
And councillors, you've got me for this one, it would appear.
Oh.
Others aren't available to present. So unless Marley is online and I'm not seeing her. So councillors, this is in direct response to the presentation of ACRE that was made at our committee meeting in June, where councillors asked for some more information. That more information is highlighted in paragraphs A through to E of paragraph 1. In paragraph 27 of the report, it directs council to note that the ACRE meetings, as was discussed at our June meeting, have been added into councillors' calendars. Councillors said if they are available and interested, they would like to go along to those. That's why you have seen them in your councillors, in your calendars. Not compulsory attendance, but just if you are curious, they are in there for you. You'd also asked for copies of submissions that ACRE has lodged on their behalf, nobody else's behalf. And the last thing I would like to draw your attention to is in the conclusion, and it's also mentioned in the executive summary, was an undertaking that the Strategy and Policy Committee would receive this updated report and provide guidance, or at least consider which committee ACRE should report into. The options that we discussed in June were either this committee, the ICM committee, or the EPC committee, and we were going to give some guidance as to the regularity of that report, whether it is at every second committee or every 6 months. So that are the highlights. I have not been intimately involved in ACRE for the last few years. I was some time ago, but really it's an information report providing you the feedback you sought in June. And I'll do my best to respond to questions.
Thank you, Tracy, and I think we can take the report as read. So with questions, Jordan hasn't given me a speaking order, so I'll come to you first, Jen, and then you, Robbie.
Thank you for the report. I really appreciated the background. I wasn't aware of all of it, about where ACRE had come from and the intention behind it. I think the intention was really good. I haven't found over the past few years, not so much this trinium, this has been more active, but last trinium I hardly knew it existed, type of thing. And so I am keen to explore the potential of what it could be, but I would say I don't think it makes sense to try and decide one of the committees to report into, because there are so many that they touch upon. I don't know. I just think it would not be that effective. Whereas we do have those meetings regularly that were requested by Fed farmers. They're quite informal, and I think that something like that on a regular basis for the rest of the trinium would allow us to sit with them, with all the chairs of committees and everyone who's on them, to explore how we either make it really work for the council and work for them, and how it's made up and all that stuff in our own time with them, or what happens going forward. Yeah, I just think we owe them that. So that's my 2 cents. I'd like to meet with them informally every quarter or 4 months or so. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. Robbie.
I was fortunate enough to sit in one last week. There was a bit of confusion of what committee holds what. They didn't understand that most of the reports they wanted were actually held within ICM, not EPC. So they sat in EPC meetings thinking they were going to collect information that wasn't there, was actually sitting in integrated catchment. So yeah, I helped most probably with that discussion the other day, that they understand the structure of and Marley was helping as well with the structure of where they need to point questions to. They're also struggling for membership by the sound of it, that they're like some of us around the table getting grey older and they're actually out there trying to get the younger ones to join ACRE. So they've got a big thing of youth planting, I think it is, isn't it, Bruce? They're working on to get younger membership into the ACRE at the moment. So they're taking on plantings all throughout the Waikato and Mercer, and there was 4 youth plantings going on, I think, throughout the whole Waikato Coromandel area to try and get new membership. So they're like the rest of us, they're struggling with that. Respectful discussion. I was quite, a director of transport spoke to them for half an hour about transport and what submissions ACRE could help with transport. So they're a diverse group of trying to do better for their membership in the community where they think there's benefits. So I take it that every councillor should go and sit in one of their meetings once in a while. It's an open, light conversation. There isn't anything that you may think there's predetermined in it. They were happy that I turned up. They were finally a councillor had turned up for a while, so they were quite happy. And I recommend all councillors go and sit in one of their meetings. There's nothing. You'll learn a bit about them, and hopefully they'll learn a bit about how the council is operating and how they can actually we can work together. And maybe one meeting a year would be, as Jennifer wouldn't hurt around the table, that I think they want to grow relationships with councillors that are in their way of thinking. So they want to align themselves with. So yeah.
So my question, a couple of questions for you, Robbie, then. Do you see them as a sort of a lobby group to council, firstly, and then do you see them reporting or coming back through ICM rather than, say, Stratton Poll? And a timing around meetings, possibly?
I actually said to them that, sorry, go back to what was the first question? They are a lobbyist group. They do submissions to central and local government. So they do both of those. And there was submissions, even letters to ministers. They talked about that. So just make it open. And no, Federated Farmers does the same thing. So don't.
Yeah. Just understanding it.
The next we are. So I think that's most probably a discussion to have around the table of what is there a committee that they can align themselves better, that then they can go and get their information, or is it just sit out there on their own and then just tack in once in a while, and is that productive in everyone's time? Because we've got staff at those meetings as well. Do you want to do that? Or do you want them to be informed in a much better way? I think that's something for all of us to sit down and work out, not just myself. I don't think that's.
I'm just interested in your feedback.
Yeah, well, I said they're quite welcome to come and sit in that 1 hour in the front of our ICM meeting that we do the biosecurity and biodiversity at the start. They're quite welcome to come and sit in that. And the problem was, I forget who the older gentleman is, Bruce. Who's the older gentleman in ACRE? Yeah, he'd be in his 70s. He's retired. So he's running around doing all that background work, and he's going, I'm getting tired. So like, yeah. I think we just invite, for integrated catchment, we invite them to come along, and if they've got time to be there, then I think that's the, yeah, I think they did have questions for Tracy, and but I think for ICM, they need a better relationship with Patrick. Patrick is their main because they're interested in the Heritage Fund, they're interested in biosecurity, biodiversity for the Waikato region. So it's really, it's getting a good connection with Patrick and maybe not so much getting into too much into meetings.
Yeah. No, I did look up the members and the groups that they represent and that make it up, and they're heavily involved in environmental work throughout the whole region.
Well,
and
there was talk
different
in that meeting
groups.
about they're trying to set up, and Bruce will know what this is, another group that actually does pest control. So that's a Waikato region groups around that can help get funding for pest control. Bruce can most probably speak on it better than I can, but they asked for groups in the west, and I gave them to get in touch with Bruce because those new 2 catchment groups that have been set on that side. So yeah.
Thanks for that. Tipper.
Kia ora. Mahi to the work ACRE's done over my term. I've managed to at least meet with them once. But my question really is to back to councillors. We have a number of different forums, groups that we bring together for their to involve them, but also for their expertise, because people volunteer there that don't necessarily arrive here. My question is, this is an old methodology for inviting that into the room, and is it the right one? Yeah. So this is back when I think we can trace the history, but somewhere where we became Environment Waikato, we decided we needed this expert group. Now, I'm not saying that mandate's fully, so if theirs is to comment and keep us in the green space or put a group of community, I'm all right with that. But we also have the youth group. Why don't we link them together? We've got a requisite, what is it, Rangatei Voices group. They don't need to look for young people. We're funding another group. But that's what I'm saying. Are we treating that logical together? And maybe those young people don't want to just speak to environment, but that's their shared page. So I'm just wondering, are we asking the right question? Like if they had it in their minds, what's the best way for you as an informal community group to bring your environmental knowledge forward? Would they pick ACRE as their method? I'm not sure, but we're here designing it. So Bruce, to those of you who have participated more fully, probably just asking, does this method suit them? Because it's an old format. And what would be more dynamic and more inclusive, given that we do have youth, Rangatei Voices, I think it's called, Jen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Ben, and then I'll come to you now.
Oh, no, Peter, Bruce first.
Can I get, Bruce.
Oh, well, you didn't need to do that. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, look, I see we're in the process at the moment of undertaking a review of ICM. It came up yesterday in our meeting yesterday when we were talking with Raupatu Trust and the JMA. We have a number of sort of advisory type groups scattered around, and I'm starting to wonder how it all fits together. And I raised this issue yesterday at the JMA meeting. And I think what our next step probably should be is actually to do a bit of thinking and a bit of work around how this actually all fits together. ACRE was established because of the famous work of Gordon Stevenson from Waiatu over Putarurue. And he, in the early stages of ACRE, it had a very direct line of advice, I would say, to the council in a way that it's sort of morphed into something where the connection has largely been lost, I think, because, as you say, it's an older model, Tipper. But you can see by the list of members in it, there's some fairly significant people on that list, and they've got lots of good stuff to tell us. So my view on this is that we should be doing a bit of work on how this all fits together, not just ACRE, and it should be in relation to the review that's currently being undertaken.
So, Mr. Chair, I want to talk on that same issue.
Yep.
So just sort of incorporating what's been said by the 2 previous speakers. I note that it's inaugurated in 1989. That's 35 years ago. It's been described as a lobby group by Robbie. But if you talk about it as the longest serving advisory committee to the regional council, well, I'd actually refute that insofar as it might be a name, ACRE, but the reality is it's moved to an independent group who set their own membership, and regional council has no input as to who they are. and we retain them as an advisory group. So it goes to Bruce's point, particularly in that what do we want from them? We know who they are, but the reality is, are they relevant? And quite frankly, I don't think an advisory group is the right vehicle anymore. So we do need to be reviewing whether they should be even classified as, and I'm not saying sever the relationship. The relationship needs to be maintained, but is it really appropriate just to keep on? Because I know at the beginning of the term, it was just, oh, ACRE, yeah, well, they've been around forever. Just no one ever discussed it. You know, it was just formality. So, and I also look at their purpose and principles, which they've just reviewed, and it says to advise the regional council on environmental policy. I'm not sure that they are really advising us because they're not a true advisory group. They submit and advocate on environmental policy. You know, I think they need to reflect on that themselves, but that's the way I see them. And particularly after they came in and spoke with us, it wasn't advice that they were advocating and submitting. So I do think we need to have a really good look at the relationship and what is it truly about, and whether we continue to just rubber stamp a group that has a tremendous position within the regional councils or regions environmental space. So I'm not sure that I'm actually asking any questions, but I just think I'm questioning whether they should be an advisory group or whether they need to stand independently and do what they continue to do. So thank you.
Thanks, Noel, and you're obviously echoing some of the comments. Tracy, can I come to you for a bit of a comment around this? And I know it's just throwing you under the bus, but yeah, just as a group with the structure, current structure, with the siloed sort of groups that we do have around us, just some thinking around this, or some thinking on where we could workshop this sort of discussion going forward, perhaps.
Yeah, look, through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's the exact conversation that ACRE's wanting us to have. From, as I said, when I first started in this role, I was responsible for ACRE, but then the matters that they were keen on started to move outside. Now, some are moving back in through policy, and they do, and we have visited them for their input, for their conversation. So they are a good touchstone. But their activities, as Councillor Cookson said, kind of are far and wide, and it really depends what's on our plate. It doesn't necessarily depend on what's on our plate for them. They have different roles and responsibilities. And just to, I think, reiterate Councillor Nichols' comments, they are far more active this training than they have been in the last two, I would say. And so it's down, as these things always are, to the personalities around the table and who wants to drive it. I think you've got a person who is keen to engage with us so that there can be some mutual benefit for both. I think what Councillor Mahuta raised in terms of, is it the right vehicle? It has been going since 1989, grown for a purpose back then, but is that purpose the same now? Is the vehicle right? You know, they're all very valid things. I think I think there is a potential there for a workshop, a joining together. I am very mindful that it's not within my directorate. It is something that is Neville is responsible for. So from my perspective, I think I've made bunches of notes to give back to Marley in the first instance is acting for Neville and then taking back to Neville. I mean, this is the conversation ACRE have been itching for the last 12 months. I think the timing is good because it can go, we can have the conversations and they can inform the new training. So you are starting from a good position of power with our next councillors coming, a good position of knowledge with our next councillors coming in. But I also think, as Councillor Cookson said, that invitation to attend the ICM committee, that is really strong. That invitation that will be sent out, as opposed to will just come along to any of the committees at any time. It does send a signal of wanting to build that positive relationship I don't know if that helps. I'm
No, no,
basically
does.
kicking the can
Yeah.
down the road.
No, it's as Deborah just alluded to, it's an action for us moving forward in a direction back to staff. So I've got Stu and then Ben.
Well, just quickly, I support the korero Tifa and Bruce, and just note we had a Tarot JMA the other day, a workshop, and co-chair Evelyn Forrest made comment of how valuable the catchment committees were up at Waikato Taupo. And I just think as part of this review process, we should probably look at those as well. And I'm not suggesting we go back to the same model of catchment committee, but I do think we probably need to factor all these things in and see how we can add value. I'm not convinced that ACRE would want to report to only one particular committee, be it this one or ICM, because they're quite broad. Whether we end up with zone-based catchment committees or a refined version of those, perhaps combined with ACRE. Look, I don't know. I'm not making any suggestions, but other than I think we should probably spend a little bit of time on the back of the ICM review to perhaps look at that. The reality is that catchment interests in the zones other than the flood and drainage control zones are going to be a bit broader in their interests than what they are in your part of the world. That's been demonstrated for the last two plus decades, and that's not a bad or a good thing. It's just the way it is, So that's where I think we should be heading here.
Thank you, Stu. Ben.
I'm more inclined to be where Jennifer is that the ACRE are reviewing their purpose statement to clearly become more independent. And at the same time, they're saying they want to advise us on environmental policy. There's a mismatch going on in their own minds. I would not support them reporting directly to a committee. I think they should be like the Federated Farmers. They're an independent group. They should approach us to have 6 monthly meetings, and they can present to the whole council a strategy and policy, but they present to us what they're doing and we can give feedback to them. I think if we give them the status of, you are now going to report to a standing committee, they will be even more inclined to advocate that they are representing our views in some way, shape or form, particularly when they're making submissions to national. And I note also that we're paying them $7,500 a year. The admin support seems rather light, given that we also have staff going and presenting to their meetings. Are we going to offer that to other groups that come forward, that will pay them to come here and that will give staff time to Federated Farmers to meet with them once a month? And yes, yeah. So
We did for economics, but environment obviously not.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that I think the idea that they have these meetings and that councillors can attend is fine. I think they should approach us to have 6 monthly meeting with council, just as other agencies do, rather than have them locked into a specific committee.
Thanks for that, Ben. Jen?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that you get a second chance to speak. I do think it's a council thing, not a committee thing. I think we should take ownership of it, as we're doing. We're spending time on it like this. The independence thing did pique my interest as well. I think that there is an interesting relationship when I don't think they'll challenge us in the way that I would like them to when they are dependent on our vouchers and other things. I think that's something we could explore with them. I also want to just double back to what Tipper said and Bruce, because there's also collective impact. There are some people there who could easily be on ACRE as well. And it is this separate thing that doesn't have its own standing either. Maybe there's something to explore there. And the Rangatahi voices totally agree. I'm not sure where that's going, but there was a good focus on geographical representation, which is what Stu mentioned as well with the catchment piece. And I think we could definitely consider more breaking down our activities rather than by subject, more by geography, because then you're getting really interesting for the districts to engage with it more and so forth as well. So suggestion forward would be an informal type of workshop, either first to get our things in order and then meet with them as part of the second part of that. and just take the rest of this training to figure out how this is going to work for us, how it's going to work for them, but do that with them and perhaps with some of these others that are floating around. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, councillors, I think what we've got is what Tracy outlined, and we'll take this back to the Customer Community and Services Directorate, under which they sort of fall at this stage. All those comments have been recorded, and so that'll go back to that directorate, and we'll see what drops out of that. So there is a motion to receive the report.
Chair,
Oh, sorry.
Just one real quick.
Yep, sorry.
And when we, if we hold a workshop or whatever, if it would be possible to have some of the history, because I think, it's an advisory group to council, and if it's morphing into something else, we need to see, how was it actually formed? I don't know the full history, and often the history will be part of the knowledge that we need to formulate a new approach.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
to follow on from Bruce, and also in TIPA, the other entities that could join in the dots with that, if we could have that at the workshop.
I think that
As
note's
well.
been taken, but yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Happy to second. I will second. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you. Next item up is the Regional Adaptation Planning Summary Report. I think Alejandro is going to speak to this. This is on page 68 of your agenda, and obviously just the regular update that we get at Stratton Pole on the adaptation projects, and then presents a status of those and progress of those TA-led adaptation plans. Just before Alejandro gets started, we have moved lunch up a bit, so we won't take a break. Now we'll just roll on through and looking to have lunch probably at about 11:30. Thank you, Alejandro.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Can I check with the people online that they can hear me, please? I will assume that is a yes. Okay. Correct, thumbs up. Thank you very much. As Councillor Meyer mentioned, this is a recurrent item, so I will keep the introduction fairly succinct. I'll just take your attention to page 70 of your agenda packs. So those are paragraphs 11 and 12. Essentially, those two tables provide you with the overview of councillor representation on paragraph 11, and then a very brief summary of where each project is at this point in time. To highlight for this particular report is the last bit of the table that is on page 71, and is the Waikato District Resilience Project. So attached to this agenda pack, you'll find the discussed SEMSA reference for that particular working group. I've called them endorsed just because there's still another meeting to confirm the minutes and just following, I guess, the governance procedures. From what I gather from the minutes, the discussion seemed to have councillors agreeing and the members of the Joint Working Party agreeing on the SEMSA reference. With that, I'm happy to take any questions through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, two questions. One is, I was hearing on the radio coming in, the government is starting to move, or select committees come back on national adaptation planning. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Correct. Thank you for that question. I wasn't sure if it was going to come up in here or as part of the submissions. So if you bear with me for a second, I'll put my notes out real quick. So we had the release of the report yesterday. So the select committee released the report from the Finance and Expenditure Committee. Two things to mention. One is I haven't had full time to digest the whole report, but it does mention a lot the report from the expert group on managed retreat. So that is a report that was prepared to assist the first select committee inquiry. What I can highlight, though, in terms of, I guess, the key points that relate to our submission back at that time is recommendations around objectives for climate adaptation framework. So the government shifted their approach, and instead of having a Climate Adaptation Act, as it was the initial intention, they will now develop the framework, and the framework is supposed, according to the recommendations they have, to include minimization of long-term costs and ensuring the first fair responses to property owners. The Prime Minister did say that this is not about protecting financial interests of people, but it's about fairness. So it's about the distribution of those outcomes. The key principle, and this relates to one of the points that we raised in our submission, for the framework should include fairness, national consistency, and incorporating Maori rights and interests. And this is because of some matters related to treaty settlements, but also underlying issues that affect Maori negatively in terms of their aspirations for development of some land and their role as kaitiaki. And if I were to just highlight one last point, and is that they've actually recommended that the government prioritize funding research to improve data on natural hazards and climate change risks. So we mentioned in our submission the diffuse nature of getting this data, how essentially many parts of the system are paying for the data over and over again. And then we're using it for roughly the same reasons. That's
So just to follow up question.
Yes.
When we were looking at Wharekawa, they were often waiting for a government funding package to pay for these things. Is there any indication so far in the select committee that the government is stumping up with money?
It does in one of the recommendations, if you second, so it's in the report, they actually put it down in the summary as who pays for investment in climate adaptation. They recommend two things. One is that the government work with local government researchers and the private sector to compile information about what we currently spend on. And the other one is investment on adaptation being paid for on. So to answer the question, not quite.
Right.
Because they want to focus it on the following principles: beneficiary pays, similar to the levels of service arrangement that we have. Exacerbator pays. So this is in biosecurity, we use some of this, and if you're a contributor to something that creates an issue, then you get levied a bit more. Public pays, and this is the fairness and equitable distribution of some of those costs, and the ability to pay. So that is, they haven't said, yes, we'll come and pay, but if I assume they decide to pay, then they've made it very clear that those are the principles that they recommend we base those decisions on.
It's fine. And just one final point in item 9G, which is actually what we put down to make sure that then people know there's target auto-generate rates will apply. There's an additional part of the sentence where a discussion on option beneficiaries will be well canvassed. I can't remember what that meant. What is a discussion on option beneficiaries?
Help there. So that when we had the discussion, I'm going to say September last year, we put that in to specifically say if there are beneficiaries, we need to identify the beneficiaries first, and that was something that council specifically asked for. So we know pretty much exactly what Alejandro just outlined, who the exacerbators are and who the beneficiaries are, such that the balance of those four things there, beneficiary, exacerbator, public inability to pay, are fair and equitable. That is my recollection from the conversation. So we didn't run to the public must pay first, that those who benefit from any works protections are squarely front and centre in the mix. That's,
as long as you understand what
I do, yep. But if councillors don't understand what it means, I think it's important.
well, public might.
Can I get Ben and Mike back? I've got a speaking order.
Sorry, I mean, I remember advocating for that clause going in. I just was rereading that part and wondering if it was actually clear enough for the public to understand.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe both staff and councillors participating in these processes are making it very clear. The clause in there, the subtext, it isn't written, the invisible link, is that we will not meet 100% of those costs, and any costs, we will be having a very deep conversation about it. The four matters that Alejandro just highlighted there is going to be a pretty big conversation for the regional and local government sector, I would assume, because the government has told us they don't have any more money. That's code for cost sharing and is a big matter on our book of accounts.
Well, yes, because when you look over the page at Karakia, Thames Coromandel, I mean, costs are millions and millions of dollars. It's huge. No.
Yep. And we understand the TAs are looking for that sort of government funding too, which they're up against the same brick wall. Jen. Grab a mic. Yeah.
Thank you for the report, Alejandra. It's really, really comprehensive. The only thing I didn't capture from there was the Waikato District Resilience Project. Looks like it's due for another meeting. Is that coming up soon? I see nodding.
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, got it. And the other question was, the Port Waikato situation was in the news. What are the next steps in that one? Kind of just left it a bit open from the report.
Because he is going to win.
I mean, obviously, this is a thing that the district council is leading. I was just wondering what's the next piece
Can't
ahead.
fight at all.
Yeah, Leandro.
To you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. So as you can see from the report, the project itself in terms of the long-term adaptation has stopped. So now the charge is being led by the district council to work directly with affected landowners in that space. The role of Waikato Regional Council is to just be an attentive party, essentially to make sure that we keep abreast of situation. And if anything comes our way in terms of consenting, because we're the consenting authority for any activities happening in the CMA, then we will know what's going on. So the report mentions a meeting that was attended by RUT director and the councillor.
Yes.
So essentially, it's a watching brief from our side. So Waikato District with the lead on that particular one, and it's going to be one of the two communities that will be the main focus of the wider district adaptation plan.
Yep, that makes sense. No, great report. Thanks so much. And yeah, I did see a story in Newsroom this morning. Select Committee fails to clarify who should pay for climate adaptation by Mark Dalder. However, what you said before about what has come out so far sounds like fairly promising principles to go with. So I'd rather they did it well and in a bipartisan way and it just sticks and it's good than wait a couple more months, hopefully, on who pays. Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. I have Noel and then Tipper. Noel.
Two issues. The first, I'll talk about Waikato District Council. I attended the last resilience meeting. And I think what I've written here is the last meeting was challenging. Having been a councillor there, I maybe shouldn't say this, but they seemed like a bunch of amateurs. And they didn't really understand. I won't hold back.
You shouldn't say it or you won't say it.
I said it because I told them at the time. The reality is they don't really understand whether that committee is a governance committee or an operational committee. And they were talking about bringing in the community owners, and I asked and challenged what the purpose of the committee was. And it was really challenging and confusing because, and then they said, well, whatever the community decides what they want, that's what we will do. And I'm saying, hang on, that's not necessarily what the regional council is going to do. I didn't say that out loud, but the reality is the community can't determine, if they want to walk away, well, that's their business, but they can't bind councils to costs and the likes. And I hope at the next meeting, they've stepped back and had a think about what they're really trying to achieve with this committee. So it's quite frustrating. Is we're there to support. I believe we've been appointed in this role. But when you see the challenges being articulated, it's hard to hold back at times. So perhaps that's where there was one other thing which I've just was writing notes. The other issue was on the radio when I was, I think it was yesterday morning, or the newspaper. Anyway, the news article was saying that the head of, I think, AA Insurance had to convince overseas reinsurers where, like, so you've seen it. So that to me is really the start of the end. Because if you cannot get insurance and you can't get reinsurance, then those communities will be abandoned. And they will have to make their own decisions as to whether they continue and abandon their assets or wait for the inevitable. And quite at Port Waikato, we have been told that this has happened over the millennia. The sand comes in, the sand goes out. We have chosen to build. Is it our fault? Is it the TA's fault for allowing subdivision there? I don't know, but that's a question that's going to have to be decided. But certainly local government cannot pay for decisions of the past. So there's two issues there. One, a challenging one, working to get resolution. The emotion is obviously hard to take out. People have got too close to the situation and stepping back as to what the role of council is at Port Waikato. And secondly, whether councils will be usurped in the decision-making by private enterprise not insuring. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel. I think we all recognise, and it has been articulated for quite a long time, that the insurance companies will be a big driver in this space, without a doubt. My other comment around that would be with WDC is if you want to point them in the direction of the work we've done on the Wharekāua coast and that sort of thing, you know, there's some great work being done there, but it was always articulated to that community that there will be cost involved in any solution that comes up. Happy to help facilitate and have you talk around what those options may be, but it was always outlined that there would be future costs involved and where those possibly would land. So
when I articulated that there was no new money from regional council to put into this project, the room stopped and they all looked at each other. And I think Rick Leafing came back and said, there's no new money. We do have some small money in our budget that we may be able to help with small things, but there is, I articulated, there was no new money, and that was part of this principles that we set out. So yeah, they have been told.
thank you. Tipper, please.
Tēnā koe, thank you, Alejandro, for the report. Just a couple of questions that haven't been asked yet. Are there any regional risks that aren't on the list that are as big as this that need to be managed, whether or not the TA is in the room or not, in terms of the schedule of things? And I know we're on like day one of 7 days, if this is it, of regional resilience, but will we get to a regional resilience framework? Is a question. Is that what we're building towards? Because some things should be just bottom lined, right? This must be like this, where as possible. And then for those TAs not engaged, and I'm particularly noting Waitomo and Otorohanga aren't, if we're going coastal, who fills the gap? Because if it happens, it's going to happen, right? That's a question. And my assumption is that means Taupō's got no resilience issues. But I understand it does, you know, with the erosion and other things that are happening. So is this just slow moving TAs as opposed to the ones that were affected at the last event? Or how do the others, when do they have to join? And then can we get them into this regional resilience framework kind of mahi rather than you fellas going on 3-peat right around the rohe? But anyway, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I just start and then Alejandro can add. So the regional resilience framework is a portfolio that has emerged as a priority through the LTP discussions. It is one that we are doing some work across the organisation because it, as Alejandro said, there's consenting, there's catchment management, there's policy, there's the whole wide ambit. These are the active projects. We've had conversations, and Alejandro and Rick and many others, Kataraina, Councillor Kneebone, Councillor Hodge, Councillor Kneebone have been involved in those conversations. Waitomo, Makatū, through Otorohanga, and talking with Otorohanga through the LTP. Councillor Kneebone and I did both Waitomo and Otorohanga. The matters that were coming back clear and strong were around resilience. Now, there's a lot to unpick under that banner. Yesterday afternoon, had the pleasure of being at Tukanu Marae, in the marae itself, which was pretty special, talking with Ngāti Karawia, the hapu down there. Again, it's resilience. It looks different when you're talking about Lake Taupo foreshore than erosion foreshore, but the principles are the same. There is an awful lot out there. We can't do everything. That's why our principles were very clear and useful. What we are doing though is we are waiting for some of our other councils to come on board. Usually it's when there's an event that means they'll come on board, but it's definitely part of that wider resilience program. It's just we've got to work with the priorities of the TA. Alejandro and the team are having conversations constantly.
Thanks, Tracy. Jen. Can I get Jen a mic? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm mindful, I heard from Stuart, attended the Waitomo community meeting, led community meeting in regards to some issues recently, and apparently it was quite difficult. I worry about the elected members around the districts, not quite, and it's hard to generalize because they're very diverse, not all being at the same capability to have these conversations. And I wonder what kind of leadership we can provide from those places where which are early movers like Wharekawa, which was great really, as we figured our way through it. And so I am turning my mind to that, and I think most of you are aware I'm traveling around the region, visiting every district to explain to them what our climate action roadmap is and to ask where they'd like to collaborate most. The idea for that came from some other regions around the country that actually have joint committees with their districts. They often have fewer districts, so it's a lot easier. But some of them really did start with the adaptation topic as their terms of reference, not the wider emissions and other complicated bits and pieces. But it's a complex space, it's an emotional space. I think we should explore whether there's a way for us to provide learnings and that framework. Perhaps there is, when that framework does land, and I didn't quite hear when that would be, and I'm mindful the local climate risk assessment work is quite behind and not every district is ready to help with that. But if we could bring it together, we will stop the duplication across all the councils in the same kind of piece of work. We will help the elected members out, I think, by sharing learnings. There's something in there, and so we'll continue to bring that back. But I'm really welcoming other people's views on what you think we should do to help your districts with this and to make sure no one's left behind.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks for your work in that space, getting around those other councils and that sort of thing. And yeah, obviously it's going to become an issue for all councils. So the more we can accelerate that process of working together and stuff like that and following through. Yeah, I mean, Wharekawa, for example, probably the one that's furthest ahead along with TCDC, by no means an easy process, and certainly acknowledge that, but it's got to start, and it's got to start somewhere. So I do have a speaking order, Stu, Robbie, and then Ben. So Stu, I'll come to you.
So some of you might have seen a guy got fined $80,000 for building an illegal seawall at Moko, and that triggered a pretty stormy meeting recently. Jen and I were in Waitomo District Council the other day, and I asked the mayor what was happening, and he said, "Oh, nothing," because when we left the meeting down there, they were going to go and reinvigorate a community group, potentially to apply for a resource consent, because they're struggling to see anything other than building a new seawall, even though that's highly unlikely not to work. Yeah, exactly. And they're probably going to want us to pay for it. And incidentally, they tried to start a consenting process to build one 20 odd years ago, and it fell over as well. But it does worry me that if that group go away and don't get their group off the ground, then the district councils potentially will, it's kind of suits them to postpone it or put it off. So we probably need to be quite proactive in terms of working with them. So to get that sort of stuff to happen, yeah, because it's obviously a lot easier to postpone it than it is to because of the emotion and stuff involved, yeah.
Stu, Tracy, you want to comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think a couple of councillors have highlighted it. It's an incredibly emotive issue. And I understand complexity. I understand the desire for leadership that we can demonstrate, but leadership sometimes can be taken as ownership. And I think we need to be very careful, highly politically charged. Each issue is so discrete. Local councils know their communities. We don't know their communities as well as they do. So it is a space that we have a lot of interaction, building those relationships through the good work of Alejandro, Miffy and Lizette's team, working with Rick, working with our Tairana Whenua unit, working with our ICM teams on the ground. So we're building those relationships, and I think that is good foundational work. Some are formal, some are informal. But as soon as we start demonstrating a degree of leadership, we have to be invited into spaces by territorial authorities, because it does look like we're being a bit paternal and telling them what to do. So it's a delicate dance. We've also been waiting for the national direction. Looks like we'll have to wait a little bit more, a little longer for that key national direction around framework, around funding and financing, because that's essentially where the rubber hits the road. But I think it is complex. We are doing a lot of work, but we just have to be really careful of the optics. As Councillor Smith said, that Port Waikato meeting, I also listened in on the entire meeting online. And as Alejandro said, we were there to support and provide information. Now, there were many times where there was the game of tug and war, where there was a push into us doing more, and respectfully we responded to that. So just want to give councillors the comfort that we are across it, but it is a, no pun intended, pretty fragile place to work.
If I could just respond, because that was really helpful, and I totally agree with the not taking on ownership, and have been reiterating that in my presentations where it's come up. But that is part of the intention of getting the elected members to that point, because it's at the staff level, there's a lot happening, but it's not until elected members are ready that a lot of the time staff are ready to bring it to them as well. So we'll keep exploring it, and we'll see what they come back, because I will be asking all the districts after the presentation. Some like TCDC, who were the first ones, will be like, oh, you're still around, you're still doing this, it's been like 6 months. But what they want to see, and so it will be very district council led as to what support we give them, even at the elected member level. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Robbie.
Myself and Councillor Daya, we were in a meeting on Monday. We sat in the Kanapanapa meeting thinking we were going to a meeting afterwards with Taupo District Council about protecting the foreshore, and no one turned up. They cancelled on us. Yeah, half an hour before. And as Councillor Downer has said, I did not realise the issues that were going on down there. He's complained about it for 2 years while he's been sitting around this table. There's toilet blocks ready to fall into Lake Taupo. There's private property ready to fall into Lake Taupo because, is it Mercury? Who's the energy company? Mercury lifts the lake, or Genesis, is it? Both. Okay, so they lift the lake up 1 metre. All of a sudden, the lake is 2 metres with a swell on it, with a wave, and it's doing erosion. Yet we cannot get these groups around the table, and this is a tourist mecca of our region, and we're not doing anything about it. Councillor Downer here has been whinging about it for 2 years. When are we going to stop whinging, and when are we going to start doing stuff? Because it's and then we hear about the complexity of actually doing stuff with iwi and everyone else getting them around the table, and it's a 2-year process just to get them in around the table to have the discussion. Yet we're mucking around here. When the discussion that he wanted to have should have already started. It's 2 years down the road and nothing's happened. Yet the toilet block is ready to fall into the river, into the lake.
Not toilet block. But that comes back to, as Councillor Kneebone said, it was brought up in the Tiawa River Trust, Tara, is that maybe we do need to look at an upper catchment, because it's joining all the dots together. I think that's the hardest thing. You know, I'm kind of flapping away up there, and I'm not taking anything away from what's happening down, you know, the upper Waikato, the lower Waikato, but we've got our our problems, as George Asher brought up, he's the chairman of the Terra, is, you know, these bays there that have got weed in them that, you know, are historical and educational places that used to be the best fishing around. You know, it's things like that that need to be brought forward. And we kind of, you mentioned it in the committee, and Patrick said, well, you know, we did, you know, it became too hard of a basket. So, yeah, I think there's, you know, we really need to get in and get these groups together and get something planning done, because that's the whole thing. It is quite complex, as Rob said. You know, you've got different hapus that you've got to then go and consult with. You know, if you're putting rock gnomes into the lake and stuff like that, because Ngāti Tūwhare Toa say you go and talk to the hapu and stuff like that. But I still believe that there's not. It's all done bits and pieces and jigsaw sort of party. We need to get together where we can actually have a plan and go forward.
What sort of support are you getting from District Council? Obviously, they just recently cancelled a meeting on you, but
Well,
it sounds,
they're the lead.
you know,
They're the
to
lead
me, they're the lead
agency.
agency.
So yeah, and I've had meetings with you know, the mayor and the deputy, and actually the deputy mayor Kevin Taylor was at our Kanapanapa meeting, and he unfortunately, they had the signing off because the audit just come through for their long-term plan, so they were signing off that the afternoon. But he was real keen that something came out of that meeting. But the biggest disappointing thing was for me is that I had the ICM chairman there that waited 3 hours for this meeting, and then at 2:30 we get an email to say that the meeting's cancelled, which is really disappointing.
Frustrating. And before I go to other councillors, Eleandro, can I get your feedback on what sort of interaction we've had with Taupo District Council around this space?
To you, Mr. Chair, in that particular space, I'm not aware of any particular work. I will, however, refer to Tracy, but I can raise it with my team to dig around.
Tracy.
So the interaction we've had previously with Taupo District Council was on submissions we prepared to plan change 34. That's a couple of years ago now, yes. I think, though, Leandro. So in recent times, there has been and continues to be a lot of overtures made through integrated catchment management, through Deb Nicol, our team leader down in our Taupo office, and through Grant Blackie, our zone manager. So a lot of the conversations are wrapped up there. There's also a lot of conversations to the side that we can't influence related to consents for operating levels of lakes. And that is a statutory process that is taken care of through our RUD Directorate. So there are a lot of conversations. Taupo District Council hasn't specifically reached out to Alejandro's team on this community adaptation for foreshore erosion looking long term. It's more those operational matters. So it's a quick overview.
Just to add into that for a second, we have an ex-employee that's going to be the operation of Three Waters there. And I think you use that opportunity of her understanding of the regional council and actually make something start happening. So I'd advise that use your relationships to your best ability.
Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Wharikawa because that was the beginning, and to pick up on Noel's point. My concern is that we are co-funding the initial consultation process by external parties to go and meet with the community. And I don't think we're being realistic in that process because they're told, they come back with this. We were surprised and shocked to find out that having gone through the Wharikawa process, that it was estimated to cost $138 million to fix. Now, that's only a small part because now Haraki's going and looking at this bit. Then you've got Thames Coromandel, which wants a seawall around Thames. I would hope that when we're doing the agreements with the people who are making the consultation process, that there's a clarity that regional council is going to require a targeted rate and that people will have to pay, because otherwise we're getting this much expectation and then we're funding analysis that come in at $138 million or co-funding those, which are completely out of kilter. And then if you start to add in Port Waikato, how much will it cost if they're given the expectation that someone's going to pay for this, and they're having the same thing at Mokau, people are going to get very upset when their house falls in the sea and no one funds it. Or yeah, so it was just to add that point in that the costs we're looking at are in almost $1 billion if you start looking around the region.
Also, Tracy.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear that those principles A through to G on page 69 are what we are strongly advocating for. We are not giving any indications that by funding one part of the work, there will be continued funding for different parts of the work. That's very clear. We're also not saying it will be a targeted rate, because which is what you just said, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, but we are saying a targeted rate is not off the table if we decide to contribute. So we're not saying, you know, a lot of that consultation is here's the options, but here's some guardrails around your options. We're being very clear there that, you know, we are not a cash cow. Yeah.
I think the guardrails came in after the Wharekawa process had got underway. So, yeah.
Thanks, Tracy. Chris.
Yeah, look, just in response, I think Ben makes excellent points in response to Tracy. I think we need to communicate right up front, as been suggesting, that there is a guardrail that doesn't involve direct funding from regional council unless it's going to be targeted. If you want us to do work, then you pay for it. Don't see that our general ratepayers should be paying for work which is not specific to their needs and requirements and service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's most of the questions by the look of Leandro. Anything you'd like to add?
Just to remind councillors that we did communicate the principles by correspondence from our director and chair to the district councils. So just to make sure that it was very clear to them, the discussion that you had and the principles council agreed on.
Thanks. Thank you, Mikhail. Seconder. Thank you, Ben. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you, Leandro. Right, the next one up is Regional Policy Statement Implementation Update. We have Sarah joining us now for an overview of the resource management reform presently being signalled and considered by central government. And this will provide us an indication of the likely work program in terms of submissions next year. Oh, right, sorry. I am too. Yeah, ignore what I just said. It's actually our annual update on the implementation of the Waikato regional policy statements. Unless you want to do Tracy's later. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, tēnā koutou. To give you a quick overview of our report, we actually have a PowerPoint, if that's able to. Oh, sorry. I'll start talking. There are 246 methods contained in our regional policy statement. And sorry, it's not, yeah, the one with the pie charts. These can be broadly grouped as either internal or external implementation or another various program of activity. Our update report has 2 attachments. The first contains Table 1, which is found on page 83 of the agenda. This table shows how we are tracking against the projects and programs of activity which assist with implementing the RPS. Most are on track. Attachment 2 is on page 93, and this is a deep dive into one aspect of external implementation of the RPS. It is focused on submissions and advocacy for the hazards and risks topic. So the charts on this slide summarize the results of our analysis of submissions and advocacy related to hazards and risks. The full analysis, which shows how many instances of feedback we provided and assessed, can be found in attachment 2. Informal feedback to territorial authorities includes feedback on draft plans and resource consents, which we are referred for comment. The assessment on this feedback is covered on page 94. The pie chart for informal feedback shows that this feedback most commonly serves the purpose of informing TAs of liquefaction and earthquake risk, which is the brown segment of 35%, or flood risk at a subject site, which is the navy blue segment of 34%. Submission process feedback, on the other hand, consists of the comments we pass on through formal endorsed submission processes. This is on page 95. Our submission comments have most commonly concerned a territorial authority's approach to general natural hazards management, which is the light blue segment on the pie chart, and flood hazard management, which is the dark green segment. Looking across the two charts, we are providing sufficient feedback across all types of hazard, with flood hazards being the most significant area where we provide feedback in both forms. We welcome any questions on that through the chair.
Any questions from councillors? Jennifer?
Just in the report you mentioned about there was significant progress made in the natural hazard strategy and implementation. And it talked about identifying primary hazard zones, but we don't have any primary hazard zones, just do we? Yeah, no, very good. And just any kind of indication in regards to the timing coming up with the review and when the effectiveness and efficiency review part is up.
Kelly, Mike, and I'll get it back for you. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the effectiveness and efficiency of the RPS, I mean, ideally we would have to review it in 10 years. It was notified in May 2016. I don't think it would be a prudent investment of ratepayer money with all the changes that are afoot that we'll hear about next to review it. There are parts of the RPS that we are reviewing as other things are being reviewed, but I would suggest that's a next LTP conversation in terms of the Section 35 effectiveness and efficiency review. Part of these reports that Alejandro's team puts together feed into that. Gotcha. Again, that would be something that we will do as budgets permit.
And so the whole review is actually just all the chunks because of all the changes. But by default, you will have reviewed the whole thing by the end of implementing all the changes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we wouldn't have.
Okay.
It is just those topics as opportunities arise and it makes sense. I just think with our next new acts, we're anticipating we would be jumping the gun to look at a full review of the RPS without solid direction.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mikhail.
I'm not sure whether this question is in the right place, but just fast tracking consents. It's a. Oh yeah. Can I just ask my question then first, Tracy, and then Charles on it, because it is a concern that, especially with iwi as well, even though it can go to them to have comment on, but what power has WRC or TAs or iwi got to actually change it? Because my understanding, and I might be wrong, is that it can override environmental issues and as well as RMA.
So do you want to pick that up in the next?
I can probably answer that specific one now.
Yeah,
so
sure.
That was a particular matter that we raised in our submission. One, our responsibilities, and particularly the responsibilities around flooding and natural hazards, and making sure that it's in the bill. As crafted, the fast track approval process has to have regard to, but we don't have an ability to override. But the experts who will sign off on the fast track approvals will have that ability to override. Hopefully, some of the matters that we raised in our submission will have been considered, and that is due back in the House on October the 18th. So we will see then, when it comes back into the House on October the 18th, it will also have the list of fast track applications. So that's when we'll be able to do quite a good risk assessment of what they may mean for us.
Yeah, because we've got 55 in our Waikato region.
We've got 55 in the entire region. It will be good to, we're waiting to see the details so we can actually understand of those 55, might they bump into natural hazards, biodiversity, all those matters.
Okay, so if we can leave any more questions on that subject to the next item, but Ben.
Yeah, just a brief one. The aquatic pest management is shown as red. Is that because the Clean Hulls project is stopped, or is it because simply the policy on that is stopped?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the first thing you mentioned is actually because the Clean Hull plan stopped. However, we do carry out biodiversity monitoring and management actions as part of our function as regional council, but the water action was meant to be that more comprehensive approach, and that was meant to be carried out through the Greenfield plan. So it's just halted because of the lack of central government support.
Any other questions for the team? Accept that motion. Thank you, Mikhail. Thank you, Jennifer. You see the motion there in front of us. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you, Sarah. Alejandro. Now it's Tracy's turn.
Tracy's turn. Jordan, if you can just flip back to the PowerPoint, please.
And this is on page 97, starts on page 97.
Yeah, so
Your agenda.
councillors, this agenda item was to assist you to make a bit of cogency out of what's coming out of central government, because there is a lot of change. If we can jump to the next slide. I'm not going to go through the report. You've had it, you've read it, or read those bits that are of interest to you. I did just want to highlight some matters. There is a bit of back to the future in some of the suggested amendments. There will be 2 acts. They are different. They're not the Natural and Built Environment and Spatial Planning Act. One will be focused on driving urban development and infrastructure, the other on managing effects. The design of the legislation will be centred on the enjoyment of property rights. Nobody really knows what that means at this stage. And having worked with district plans for 15 years, they're never written for you, they're written for your neighbours. So that will be interesting. Spatial plans is still part of the process. Single regulatory plan, just girding yourself for a very busy submissions process next year. Along with everything else, we'll have 7 new national policy statements and amendments to the 14 we have. There's an expert advisory group who'll be advising Cabinet and looking to have something with Cabinet the end of this year. Of the 6-person group, we know 5 of them. 3 of them are closely affiliated with the Waikato region, so that's good. Not the regional council, the region. And we're looking at a detailed act probably mid next year. Yesterday, the Prime Minister made some announcements and things are coming out thick and fast that I also wanted to identify for you. So Fast Track Approvals Bill will be reported back from the Environment Committee into the House on the 18th. The Resource Management, Freshwater and Other Matters Bill, so those, the Te Manawa Te Wai, reference mining, intensive winter grazing and freshwater farm plans were contained in that. That's about to go through its 2nd reading in the House. So by the end of October, we will have some bills. We know that infrastructure will be the focus of the government in their next quarter plan. That one of those matters of importance to us will be introduction of legislation to make it easier to build offshore wind farms. There will also be finalisation of the development of farm level emissions and how that will be measured. The government will also announce policy direction to limit farm conversions to forestry on high quality land to protect food production. They will also publish our 2nd emissions reduction plan, and also deliver emissions reduction targets. If, Jordan, we can just jump a couple of slides. And these are in your appendix. What I also wanted to identify is this is the local government systems improvement slide. Now this slide is really useful because it tidily puts everything together and provides it some context. I'll just draw your attention there, the refocus on the purpose of local government. So removing all references to community wellbeing, reverting to the previous purpose of local government and adding while supporting local economic growth and development. So that's pretty pertinent. And in the next quarter plan, Cabinet will also make decisions on measures to get local councils back to basics And finally, look to pass legislation to remove agriculture from the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So very busy. You will be very busy in response. But I just really wanted to paint this picture. It's also a document that our iwi partners, this report, keen to get their hands on, because there is so much happening. It's good to just put it together in one package. Unfortunately, I have stolen a bit of Miffy's thunder that was in the next item around where some things are at, but lots happening.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Jen.
Just a quick one I could say, but I won't so much. But the topic-based reform signals, there was one on heritage buildings on that table. And I just thought, is there an opportunity for us to give feedback on perhaps one day being able to resolve the Rotowaro structure that's causing so much pollution by just sitting there, but somehow being very important for historical reasons.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Nichols. So Rotowaro was a carbonisation plant, the old creosote plant just north of Huntly. It is a contaminated site. It is one of the 10 contaminated sites on MFE's list.
Yeah.
Actually, 2 weeks ago, we refreshed the memo in response to an issue that Councillor Mahuta raised. Happy to circulate that to councillors who are unaware of that site.
Yeah, it'd be
It
great.
is a site that has historic places category 1 register on it, which makes it problematic and difficult. Land ownership and land tenure is difficult. I did note the government made an announcement yesterday in terms of funding landfills that are in hazard prone areas, and I thought, we might need to just have a conversation with them about that. So that's Rotowaro for those who don't know.
Thanks. Anything we can, barriers we can remove there, obviously, to clean up would be great.
Ben.
You just briefly on the topic-based reform signals drinking water. Existing drinking water standards will be clarified, making it easier for regional councils to implement regulations. So do we set the regulations for drinking water, or is that a district council process?
It is Taumata Arawai, the regulatory authority. What we have responsibility for is identifying, and I've forgotten the exact nomenclature, but surface water and drinking water source areas and protecting those through regional plans, mapping essentially. These words, by the way, are not mine. I'm not assuming in any way, shape or form it'll make it easier for us, but we'll wait to see the detail. Yeah.
Thanks, Tracy.
So I love the one where they're going to explore whether efficiencies can be found in how individual elected councillors conduct their business.
We
Good
have a
luck on
mover
that
and,
one.
mover and Councillor Smith, a seconder and Councillor Mahuta. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. I am letting your lunch go cold, Noel, and I'm sure, but we are now moving on to our last item, which is our submission summary report on page 108. And we have Miffy joining us.
Kia ora tātou. I will try and be brief. So I'll take the report as read, but I will just note there is an update there on the extended duration of coastal permits for marine farms. And we do have Kristen here if you do have some questions on that one, because there's a bit of an analysis about what that means for us. I just wanted to let you know the consultation opportunities that have arisen since this report. As you know, things don't stand still. So we have draft regulations for natural hazard information to be included on LIMS. So a submission is being prepared and there will be a submissions subcommittee on the 24th of October for you to have a look at that one. There are proposed amendments to the Biosecurity Act. So their discussion, it's a discussion paper at this stage, so most likely there will be a staff submission, but there is quite a number of proposals for change there, which will, and then that'll lead to a bill, which we will be doing we will likely do a formal submission on, so that'll be when it'll come to you. There are amendments proposed to the marine and coastal area Takutai Moana Customary Marine Title Amendment Bill. So we'll be looking at that to see if we need to be making any submission on that. That closes 15th of October. And the Ahuaki Waipa Spatial Plan opens for consultation on Friday. So we'll be having a look at that to make, see if we need to make comments. We have been involved through the process so far. Any questions?
Thanks, Miffy. And I just alerted councillors on that submissions subcommittee that's coming up on the natural hazards onto limbs. Again, we spoke of emotive issues around the area. That is a very emotional, emotive issue too. So please make yourselves aware of what our submission contains, because once it goes through that committee, it will be submitted. Thank you. Ben.
Yeah, just briefly on the consent duration extensions for aquaculture. It notes here that the consent duration extension will apply to all consents expiring prior to 2050. But over the page, you've said that realistically legislation will affect 24 out of 38 consents. So are they all going through, or are some being delayed? What's happening there?
So basically it applies to all current consents that expire before 2050. Some of the consents expire or would have expired at the end of the year, and some farmers have applied for renewal consents. So there they have the choice whether they want to carry on with their current application or whether they just want to withdraw their application and just accept the 20-year duration. So that's their choice, and they have to let us know by early November which
way they're going to
they want to
Okay,
go with.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Ben. Any other questions for the girls? Thank you. Thank you, Chris. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you very much for that. And that brings us to the end of the day, and I'll get you to close up with a Karakia. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, councillors. I was out by 30 minutes. There you go. Not bad. No, I'll do better next time. You were very enthusiastic about the adaptation report. I underestimated. Okay, finish with our karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia mai te uri tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tērana, te hiningaro, i te ara takatū. Koe rā i rongo, i whakairia ake ki runga, kia tēnā, tēnā. Haumie hui e tae ki. Lunch is served.
Lunch is served. Thank you very much, councillors and staff. That's us. Meeting closed at 12:02. Enjoy the rest of your day.